Now I've seen but one Major League Ball game, and that was the one the day before. But they had changed uh, series that day, and they was playing the Philadelphia Athletics. Well, the Athletics had a good ball club, and first time I come to bat, I hit a ball to the left center, hit it good. And Tilly Walker was playing center field. And old Tilly went over and caught the ball backhanded. Made a good catch on the ball. Well, I think I had 9 assists that day. But the reason I had so many is because balls had been going through the infield. I was standing in front of them. Well, and the only problem I had was those double deckers, and the stands were full of people. And when I get a ball out and raise up to throw to first base, I couldn't find the first baseman. He looked like a little midget standing over there. But that was the only problem I had, was hitting the first baseman. I had a good arm. I had no problem there. So, on the second trip to the plate, old Scott Perry, poor Scott's dead now, but I should have sent him Christmas cards while he was living. But he threw me the little old, they call them sliders now, but we call them cunny thumb curves back in there. So he threw me that little old cunny thumb curve outside. And I hit that thing over third baseman's head for a triple. Well, as I rounded the bases, didn't nothing touch the ground except my tips of my toes. I was just flying off. I was in the stands, was a hooping and hollering and cheering on. And I got around the third base, and I looked around and I said, sure, this ain't so tough up here. So, from that day to this, I never was nervous a bit. Then went on, I played in that World Series that fall against Brooklyn, and I played the 1932 World Series with the Yankees against the Cubs. I never was nervous anymore. But of course, you get yourself keyed up. And
Daddy, tell me the names of the ball players who you played with at Cleveland at that time.
And this was the ball players that was the Cleveland ball club when I got there, when I went there in 1920. Steve O'Neill was our catcher, and he was a great one, good catcher. And then the first base, we had two, had Doug Johnson and George Burns. They alternated, one right-hand hitter and a left-hand hitter. Then the second base had Bill Womby. Of course, I was playing shortstop. And third base had Larry Gardner. Larry Gardner was, he eventually was an athletic director up in the University of Vermont. And in the outfield, I had Charlie Jameson, who was a good one, and Elmer Smith, right field, was a good one. Joe Wood, Smoky Joe Wood, you've heard him. Yeah. He was a pitcher, and they hurt his arm, and he went to the outfield and made.
Have the outfielders go ahead.
Yeah, are you ready?
Yeah. The players.
You know, back in my era, we had playing managers. Chris Speaker was our manager and played center field for us. And Washington had Joe Cronin and Bucky Harris. They were managers. And Ty Cobb was the manager of Detroit and played. But now Chris Speaker was our manager and played center field. And now I've seen all the center fielders from 19 and 20 down to the present day, including DiMaggio and Willie Mays and all them fellas. But Tris Speaker's the greatest center fielder that I ever saw. Tris, Tris Speaker, I was playing shortstop and Tris Speaker was playing center field, and a shot that was hit over his head. I never saw Tris Speaker turn yet. When I could turn around from shortstop and look to see where the outfielder was, he was gone. And he wouldn't turn his head and look for that ball. He'd run with his back to the ball. And looked like the ball was going to hit him in the top of the head. He'd go out there and turn around, and that would be the ball. I used to ask him, I says, Spoke, we all called him Spoke. I said to him, I said, Spoke, how in the world do you do that? He says, I do it by instinct. I said, well, I can't tell you. But he could come in on those balls. I never saw him turn over on like them boys do now, jump after a ball and turn over and roll. He'd slide after that ball on the ground and catch it like he's going to catch it in his lap. He'd catch that ball. He was a great outfielder, great thrower, he's one of the best judges of a ball in the outfield that I ever saw. But Joe Wood was a good outfielder, and we had a good ball club. I'll tell you a story on Tris Speaker. We had a boy in our club named Morton, Guy Morton. He was a pitcher and a good pitcher. So we finished up the series in New York, and we were going to catch a train that night up to Boston. So we was leaving from the Grand Central Station, and the train always come parked in there. You come down a runway and walk right into the Pullman car. So it was hot as a six-shooter out there. And we boys were all gathered now to get on the train and go up to Boston. We was gathering around our Pullman, and we looked up the runway, and here come old Guy Morton. Down the runway was somebody, I don't know who it was now, but he was loaded to the gills. He was taking up the whole runway. He was going to one, hadn't been with the cars, he'd have walked off into the tracks. But he'd walk from one side of that thing to the other. So we boys kind of moved off. Some fellow says, looked up, we call him Alabama Blossom. They said, look at old Bloss. So after we saw what Bloss was doing, we moved off and left Speaker standing there. He'd already gathered. Speaker had white pants, white shoes, and he was white-headed, and had a white shirt on. He was standing there, and old guy walked up to him. Speaker took him by the arm, got his suitcase, went on inside, come back out, didn't say a word, but we didn't know what went on. So that's all that happened. So we got in Boston the next morning, about 7 o'clock. Lefty Wiseman was our trainer, and Lefty comes through the cars on a meeting in Speaker's room before breakfast. Meeting in Speaker's room before breakfast. Well, we didn't know what was coming on. So we were staying at the Old Brunswick Hotel. So we went into the Old Brunswick Hotel, set our suitcases down, and didn't eat breakfast. Didn't even go up to the room and check in. Well, we all went up to Speaker's suite. He was assigned a suite. So we went up there and all sat down, and all of us. And old guy was sitting over on a stool, had on a cap, gray cap. I never will forget it. And Speaker looked at Lefty Wiseman and says, "Lefty, is everybody in here?" Lefty says, "Yes." Said, "Close the door." So he looked around at the old guy, and he says, "Guy, you were so drunk last night when you come to that trance and you walked up to me and says, 'Say, Porter, where's my bud?' He says, 'I put you in bed,' and he says, 'That's gonna cost you $500," and it says, "You pitch it today," and it says, "The meeting is over." That was the shortest meeting I was ever in my life. An old guy went out that day and shut Boston out. He pitched, so he shut Boston out. Another funny story on Speaker. At one time, when Speaker was managing, we needed an outfielder. And they went down in the Texas League and they got a fellow by the name of Sam Langford. Old Sam had just joined our club in Cleveland, and Sam could just wear them right-handers out, but he couldn't hit a left-hander with a paddle. And he never had hit it Lefty Grove. Lefty Grove was right in his prime. He never had hit it old Lefty. So we tried to school old Sam on how to hit Lefty Groves. So we did the best we could. But I hit right behind Sam that day. And old Sam was up there. Lefty was popping that fastball in there. In fact, Lefty was, I think, one of the best, if not the best left-hander in the major leagues that's ever been in there. He'd throw a ball on a clear day, and them white balls looked like a sewing thread coming in there. But old Sam was up there hitting the Lefty Groves, and Sam struck out the first 3 times he was at bat. Didn't even foul the ball. So on his 4th trip to the plate, old Sam had 1 strike on him, then he fouled the ball. Well, the stands gave him old Sam, gave him a big hand for fouling the ball. But old Sam got out. Chris Speaker was still on the base, and he hollered at Sam. Says, "Say, Sam, you want me to send the pinch hitter up for you?" Sam says, "What is that?" He says, "You want me to send the pinch hitter up for you?" Sam says, "Hell no, I'll be through here in just a minute." and he cut out on Sam and struck him out 4 times. But Sam, he never did let up. He was cutting and slashing, dust flying, everything, but he struck out 4 times that day.
Dad, tell me the story about Tris Speaker when he got in a batting slump one time, what he did.
Oh, we was over in Washington. You know, we used to get in slump just like they do now. Tris Speaker was hitting line drives and bullets and stuff, but they was always right at somebody. So we was over in Washington. I forgot who pitched. I think George Mowbray was pitching. But he was pitching, and the old guy, Speaker, hit the bat once or twice, and he'd hit the ball good. And he come over there, and he reached down and got a fungo. Fungo is that bat we hit to the infield, little bat, a little bit bigger than a stick. But he picked up that fungo and says, "I'm gonna take this fungo up here," and says, "I'm gonna hit." But ever who was pitching, I don't know. As I say, I think it was George Mowbray. But he hit the ball, and the bat flew into a dozen pieces, and the ball went right over the shortstop's head into the left field, and that was the first hit that he'd gotten in several games. And he went on to set a record at that time on consecutive basis. I think he got 12 at that time, but that set the records. And of course, Speaker was always a good hitter. He wound up, I think, a lifetime around 340s. I don't know the exact figures, but he was a great hitter, great outfielder, and a wonderful person. He was one of the best managers that I played under while I was in the major leagues.
Was he a player manager?
He was a playing manager. We had several playing managers. They used to have that, playing managers.
Let's go back a little retrospect, Dad, and tell me about, talking about hitting. Tell me about Bob Dowie that was down in New Orleans.
Down in New York. Old Bob's the only fella that I ever saw in baseball that did not want to hit. He wouldn't even take hitting practice. He was the worst hitter that I ever saw, but he was a good catcher. And they had him as a second catcher down in New Orleans. But old Bob one day he was catching, and of course he had to hit. So that old Dan finisher, the old Bob, he knew Bob. But Bob got at the plate, and he'd stick his hands out. He was a right-hand hitter, and he'd stick his hands out and let shoulder, arms, anything but the bat, and let the ball hit him. Well, old Dan wouldn't let him take his base, but he got hit, I think it was 7 times while he was up there before old Dan would let him take his base. But Bob was the worst hitter that I ever saw.
Dad, if you had to pick one thing, of course, a lot of it's natural ability, but what would you say the most important thing as far as hitting a ball, and there's more, let's say, the secret of hitting a ball?
Well, in order to be a good hitter, there's not too many. The fundamentals are all the same, regardless, and the results are all the same. But in order to be a good hitter, the first thing you've got to do is learn where the strike zone is. And then the next thing you've got to do, you've got to get your good, comfortable position to where you can hit any pitch in that strike zone, regardless of what it is. Knuckleball, emery ball, shine ball, curve ball, sliders, anything. And then make the ball be in the strike zone, and then you've got to get your bat in the same plane with that ball. Now that they teach them to have the bat way up over the head, well, the bat comes down in an arc, and if you don't hit that ball just exactly right, well, you're going to hit a fly ball. And a good outfielder, we used to call it a can of corn. You just might as well not hit the ball if you're going to uppercut the ball. But get your bat in the same plane with the ball, and that's where you got to hit the ball, and start your bat in the same plane with the ball, and you won't have too much effort. And on a low pitch, you have to uppercut that ball, but your left leg will take care of that. But as I say, you've got to get a comfortable stance, and then pick up the ball as soon as you can. Pick it up. Don't look at the pitcher. Don't look at the pitcher. Look at the ball. Pick up the ball and see the ball leave your bat. See your ball leave the bat. That's when you're following the ball good, and you got to hit it out in front of you. You can't hit it back behind you. Hit it out in front of you. And instead of hitting up at the ball, hit straight into the ball, and you hit line drives, and the ball, you'll either hit a line drive or ball on the ground. You ain't got a chance with the ball in the air with a good outfielder or if somebody can go hit it.
Tell me the story you told me about Uncle Steve pinch hitting when he first came up.
Old Steve was myself.
This is Rig Stevenson.
Old Steve was a boy. He and roomed together in college and played all the way up. Well, we both went to Cleveland. Steve was hitting around 380 and couldn't get in the lineup. We had a good ball for him, good hitting ball for him. But we was over in Chicago and little Dickie Cub was pitching. Little Dickie had a little old screwball. And they called them fadeaways and all that kind of stuff, but a little old screwball. So the White Sox must have been leading us. And we had to have a pinch hitter. Had to have a pinch hitter, so Speaker says, Steve, what me hit? So Steve shuffled around there and he got him a bat. And he went up there, and we had an old coach on our club named Jack McAllister. They were real witty. He was a good man. So old Steve went up there to pinch hit, and Dickie Cub threw that little old screwball up there. Steve took the confoundedest swing you ever saw, and he hit that ball right on the end of his bat. Well, the ball hit the ground about a third of the way to the pitcher, and it had so much English on it, it was just jumping around there on the ground. But Steve was looking for the ball like he didn't know where it was. He kept looking around. And finally he saw Dickie Cub just walked over there and picked up the ball. Threw to first base, Steve was out. All right, Steve finally found the ball, everything, so he come back to the bench and he picked up his glove and it was patting his glove with the other hand and everything. So Jack McAllister said to him, where you going, Steve? Steve says, I'm going in the clubhouse. I'll just bench here. Jack McAllister said to him, says, Steve, they ain't gonna count time in bat. What you did up there just now. Steve says, you ready to move? And Jack says, no. So Steve sat out on the bench, like he's waiting for another turn at bat. But I get a kick out of that. It was old Steve. I can see it right now. It was funny then. It's still funny now.
Dad, tell me the story about old Smee Jolly and his, what, in 3 errors?
Smee Jolly, he made 3 errors on 1 ball in Cleveland, and I saw it. He's come out and ripped us, believe it or not, twice. And I believe it's been in there 3 times, but I've seen it twice. And I saw the play in Cleveland. We were playing the White Sox, and Jimmy Dykes was managing the White Sox at that time. And old Smead was a good hitter. He was a great hitter. But he couldn't hem a ball up in a ditch on a ground ball. He was terrible. But old Jimmy stood him out there in right field in Cleveland. They had a great big cement wall. And they had a screen on top of it in the right field, way up. You had to hit a ball good to hit it over there. But old Smead, Jimmy sent old Smead out there and he backed up close to that wall. But Glenn Meyer was catching that day. And come up a little shower of rain during the ball game, not enough to call the game or take the, put the tarpaulin on. So Glenn was hit, and old Smead was standing out there in the right field, and Glenn hit a screaming line drive right straight at Smead, right straight at him. And you fellas have scooted rocks on water and how to pick up speed and scoot. Well, that ball hit that damp grass and it scooted right between old Smead's legs before he could get out. All right, that was error number one. So Smead turned around after that ball, and he was running back towards that cement wall to get the ball. Well, the ball hit that cement wall and bounded right straight back at Smead. Well, it went back between his legs. Well, as I say, it had good momentum on it. And it was rolling back towards the infield, and old Smead was running along with the side of it like a fella trying to catch a rabbit or something. We was all out of the dugout hooping and hollering. The people in the stands were screaming and hollering. Old Smead was laughing. He was a good-natured fellow. He was laughing. So finally he caught up with that ball. And he stopped and braced himself. By that time, mine had done round at second base on his way to third. So Smead stopped, got that ball, and he braced himself, and he threw that ball 15 rows up in the stands, way over, way up. Well, everybody was screaming and hollering, Smead was laughing, and you could hear old Smead all over the field. All he says, "My God, I didn't know I could throw a ball."